All right, to break this all down, let's bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion, you see on the left, and Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tia Mitchell, which you see on the right. It's great to see Tia again. Tia, you and I haven't been in a split screen since Joe Biden called me a junkie back in 2020. So hopefully this will be much. Look it up online.
I got to know. I want to know that story.
But Tia, welcome. Let's just begin right at the top. This race was still close. What was it about Warnock's campaign that let him win?
Well, going into Election Day, it did seem like Warnock had all the momentum. He had raised more money. He had a lot of help on the ground. I spoke Monday night to some gentlemen who had flown in from California to help knock on doors for Senator Warnock. He had unions and grassroots organizations working to get out the vote on his behalf. And then it appeared that Herschel Walker's campaign had kind of tapered off. Last weekend, the final weekend before the election, he only had one public event. So it really seemed like the momentum was on Warnock's side. We knew that he built up a good head start with early voting, and it was going to come down to Election Day voting if Herschel Walker was going to be able to make that up, and he was not.
Not just the momentum, the money. I think it was like the Democrats spent twice the amount of money as the Republicans on this runoff. So Senator Warnock, Nikole, his win gives Democrats 51 seats in the Senate. And some people are going to say, well, that's just one extra seat than what you had before. But how is this going to help President Biden's agenda?
Well, that actually remains to be determined. I mean, it will help in the sense of, for instance, confirming judicial nominees, and you will probably see less of Vice President Kamala Harris having to serve as that tie-breaking vote. So it will move the process along faster when it comes to those types of things. And also in terms of committees, Democrats will now be able to have a majority on their respective committees as opposed to the committees being evenly divided right now because of the 50-50 dynamic. So that being said, I think the real question is, in terms of the president's agenda and legislation, that's where we really have to watch come January how effective this extra seat will be, because at the end of the day, a lot of legislation is still going to require 60 votes for passage, which means that Democrats are still going to have to bring Republicans along, and maybe now instead of 10, it will just be 9, but still that will be a lift for Democrats and Republicans going forward.
And what jumped out to me in your report, Nikole, was the line where you mentioned that Walker is now the 5th Trump-backed candidate to lose an election. Tia, what does this mean for Republicans, considering that some voters did vote for Republican Governor Kemp, but didn't vote for Herschel Walker in the regular election, midterm election? So are they hearing the message from Republican voters that there is a line sometimes they're not willing to cross?
I think Republicans are hearing the message. Mitch McConnell has said that for months, even before the general election and all the losses. Mitch McConnell said he was concerned about candidate quality, but he couldn't control the outcome of primaries. I think one thing that Republicans are going to start talking about is Donald Trump. All these candidates that turned out to be flawed candidates, most of them were recruited by Trump. They were Trump acolytes, and they were not successful in the midterms. It's clear in states like Georgia that it's hard to win a statewide vote with these MAGA Republican candidates. So Republicans have to do some soul searching because they know that they're not successful in swing states, but they also have to deal with the reality that former President Trump, in a lot of ways, is still the leader of the party. And they're finding out that those two things don't match up.
So the quality of the candidate, definitely a factor. But for Democrats, Nikole, early voting was a huge factor as well. And if we sort of take ourselves back to the general election, we remember Trump and other Republicans sort of being critical of early voting.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
And
like
mail-in
casting
ballots.
doubt on it. And what we saw was a tremendous amount of people taking advantage of early voting in Georgia. And so my question to you is, what sort of an impact did that have for the Democrats? And is this something now the GOP may be looking at a little differently?
Well, yeah, that stronger turnout in the early vote certainly allowed Senator Warnock to bank more votes than his opponent, and so that did put him at an advantage going into Election Day. And he talked about that as recently as yesterday, that he expected to go in with a lot of votes, but that his opponent could catch up with that in-person voting on Election Day. I would also note, in terms of the numbers, are really remarkable when you look at them. 1.6 million people roughly turned out yesterday for in-person voting on Election Day, and that is yet another state record, surpassing in-person turnout on Election Day even as recently as this November and the last runoff back in 2021. So those are some significant numbers, and really is probably the main reason why Walker was able to keep things so close. But that being said, those on his side and on his team have acknowledged that going forward, certainly Republicans do need to be more aggressive about an early vote strategy, that they too need to try to run up the totals when those opportunities present themselves for early voting. So kind of to Tia's point, I think you will see Republicans also do some soul searching there and try to take a page out of Democrats' playbook.
All right, Tia Mitchell and Nikole Killion, thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Tia.